can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We are going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. Many Americans have been concerned to see the recent rise in gasoline prices here at home. This short-term increase has been entirely the result of the Iranian regime launching deranged terror attacks against commercial oil tankers in neighboring countries that have nothing to do with the conflict. This is yet more proof that Iran can never be trusted with nuclear weapons, and the country has been eviscerated and essentially is really no longer a threat. They were the bully of the Middle East, but they're the bully no longer. The problem with the Strait is they can have one terrorist there with a machine gun someplace, and they'll say, oh, it's not totally clean, So let them do it. Let France do it. They get a lot of oil from the Strait. Let the European countries do it. Let South Korea, who is not helpful to us, by the way, let South Korea, we only have 45,000 soldiers in harm's way over there right next to a nuclear force. Let South Korea do it. Let Japan do it. They get 90% of their oil from the Strait. Let China do it. Let them all do it. What the hell are we doing it for?
Stocks sank and oil jumped above $100 on Thursday after US President Donald Trump vowed to keep hitting Iran.
We're in great shape for the future.
Trump said in a Wednesday primetime address the US would hit Iran extremely hard within weeks. He argued key military aims were close to being met and the conflict was nearing its end. But he didn't give a timeline for an exit, which kept investors unsure about the scope and duration of the campaign. Oil prices climbed more than 7% on Thursday, with Brent crude near $108 per barrel by early morning in Europe. It was driven by investor concerns Trump didn't spell out when or how the Strait of Hormuz would reopen. The strait is a critical shipping route which was recently shut, and oil supply disruptions have already hit Asia hard. Asian stocks were down after the speech, with almost all regional bourses in the red. Japan's Nikkei lowered by 2.4%, while South Korea's Kospi slid even more at 4.7%. Europe also opened with a fall of more than 1%, and US stock futures slid by a similar amount. A potential end to the month-long US-Israeli war with Iran had lifted global stocks and knocked the dollar off its recent highs in the past 2 sessions. That after a brutal March where soaring oil prices hurt risk assets. But investors were back to selling almost everything except the US dollar after Trump's Wednesday speech. The risk-off mood looks set to grow ahead of the long weekend, with many global markets shut on Friday. Investors are likely to cut exposure quickly. They may be wary that any prolonged disruption to shipping through the Strait of Hormuz would lead to a sharp blow to global growth. Trump said the US doesn't need the key oil gateway and it will open naturally once the conflict is over.
It was a moment these Gazan mothers had been waiting more than 2 years for. Their babies, born prematurely 2 years ago and evacuated to Egypt, finally came home. Bisan was one of 11 babies, now toddlers, who were reunited with family in Gaza on Monday as part of a United Nations organized mission. Today is like a birthday, like a new beginning, her mother Sundus Al-Kurd said, and I will make up for everything my daughter was deprived of, God willing. In 2023, 29 preterm babies were evacuated from the neonatal intensive care unit at Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. That's when Israeli forces raided the facility, accusing Hamas of using it for military purposes. The parents were not allowed to go with their babies to Egypt. Al-Kurd said for almost a year she didn't know if Bisan was still alive. She spoke of the heartache of not being able to hold her daughter for 2.5 long years. The reunion was enabled by a US-brokered deal in October that halted most fighting. Israeli attacks have destroyed and damaged medical facilities and neonatal units across Gaza. Israel says Hamas and other militants were using the hospitals to store weapons and hide fighters. The groups deny this. What is left is a big shortage of medications for premature infants, according to Mohammed Abu Salmir, director of Al-Shifa Hospital, as well as ventilators and oxygen. Abu Salmir said 7 of the 29 infants evacuated died while in Egypt, and the remaining 11 who did not return to Gaza were with family. For Al-Kurd, bringing Bisan home filled a void in her life after an Israeli airstrike on their home in North Gaza killed another daughter and 9 other family members. Bisan was delivered prematurely that day, with Al-Kurd, then 8 months pregnant, wounded in the attack. Speaking from their tent encampment in Gaza City, Al-Kurd spoke of worries about limited food and toys and Israel continuing some strikes in Gaza. But she says she will try hard to provide for Bisan. She still doesn't know who her mother is, who her father is, who her family is, Al-Kurd said. Hopefully, things will improve with time and the girl will know us.
Days before the harvest begins, this South African farmer is at a loss as to where he can source and afford fuel.
We'll probably be using pretty close to 2,000 litres a day. So 2,000 litres a day, 12,000 litres, that's 6 days, then you're out of fuel.
Derek Matthews is among thousands of farmers struggling with a double price blow. Both fuel and fertiliser costs have shot up as the US-Israeli war against Iran continues into a second month. And key energy transit routes like the Strait of Hormuz, have been choked, upending global energy markets amid higher crude oil prices. Farmers across South Africa complain that fuel is becoming difficult to source as suppliers grapple with higher demand, logistics constraints, and hoarding of unregulated diesel.
When I put the order in, the price was still at 18 Rand a litre. Okay. The supplier has not been able to deliver for me. Every second day they come back and then there's this hold up, they haven't got fuel, their trucks didn't get fuel.
In the weeks since Matthews placed his order, prices have risen by a third to 24 Rand, equivalent to $1.43 per litre. At those prices, some of his crops become less financially viable, he said.
It doesn't make any financial sense at all to grow maize.
And while fuel industry executives and government officials assured farmers that fuel stocks are sufficient to cover April with isolated disruptions, a March survey by Agri South Africa found that just under half of farmers who responded couldn't get diesel.
BYD posted a 7th straight monthly sales decline in March, according to Reuters calculations. That's as the Chinese electric vehicle maker struggles with growing competition in the world's largest auto market. BYD's sales plunged over a fifth last month from a year earlier, Reuters found. However, this had eased from a 41% year-on-year decline in February, based on a post from an executive at the automaker. Calculations also showed Q1 sales were down 30% from the same period in 2025. BYD's sales in its home market have been squeezed by growing competition from rivals including Geely and Leap Motor. It prompted the EV market's leader last month to roll out its first major battery upgrade in 6 years. The new lineup is priced above $21,700, a key threshold in China's hyper-competitive EV market. And it's raised doubts about BYD's ability to boost sales as buyers continue to favour cheaper models. Overseas sales remain a bright spot, totalling over 45% of all vehicles sold last year. BYD is, quote, highly confident of hitting its 2026 overseas sales target of 1.5 million vehicles, Reuters reported on Monday.
Elon Musk's SpaceX has confidentially filed for an initial public offering, setting the stage for what could become the largest stock market listing on record. That's according to a person familiar with the matter who spoke to Reuters on Wednesday. SpaceX could seek to raise more than $50 billion in the IPO, handily surpassing Saudi Aramco's public offering in 2019, which remains the largest IPO on record. The filing comes after SpaceX absorbed Musk's artificial intelligence startup xAI. The deal valued the rocket company at $1 trillion and xAI, which developed the Grok chatbot, at $250 billion. The public listing would potentially value SpaceX at $1.75 trillion, signaling that space exploration has moved from a speculative venture to a mainstream investment theme. A blockbuster SpaceX debut could jolt the IPO market back to life after years of subdued activity. Some investors could be drawn in simply by Musk's brand, while others may be seeking exposure to SpaceX's fast-growing space and satellite businesses. Musk's sprawling business empire, unofficially dubbed the Muskonomy, includes Tesla, brain chip maker Neuralink, tunnel digging firm The Boring Company, and social media platform X, which last year was folded into xAI. Analysts say that questions regarding Musk's ability to oversee multiple companies with market values exceeding $1 trillion could temper investor enthusiasm in the IPO. Meanwhile, several other high-profile startups, including ChatGPT maker OpenAI and rival Anthropic, are also said to be weighing large IPOs, setting up a broader test of investor appetite for new listings.
NASA launched the Artemis 2 mission from Florida on Wednesday, sending 4 astronauts on a nearly 10-day journey around the moon and back. The Space Launch System rocket lifted off from Kennedy Space Center just before sunset, carrying 3 American astronauts and 1 Canadian astronaut inside its Orion space capsule. Crowds gathered nearby to watch the historic liftoff. Artemis 2 is the first crewed flight for NASA's Artemis program and will take humans farther from Earth than ever before, some 252,000 miles. In a press conference following the launch, NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman said there was a partial loss of communications with the Orion spacecraft about 51 minutes into the mission. But he said communications had since been fully restored.
They're secure and they're in great spirits. We will continue to monitor their health and the status as we move into the next phase of the Artemis 2 mission. So after a brief 54-year intermission, NASA is back in the business of sending astronauts to the moon. We have arrived at this point through a sustained effort and national commitment and the work of thousands across the agency, our industry partners, and our international allies.
The mission is a major test as NASA works toward landing astronauts on the moon in 2028, more than 50 years after the Apollo lunar landings. Competition is also heating up with China, which has plans for its own lunar landing by around 2030.
Competition can be a good thing, and we certainly have competition now. I think as a result, you're going to see a lot more progress, more so than you have in the, since when this was originally conceived under Constellation. We're going to get back into the business of launching rockets on a regular cadence, and we're going to bring the world along with us.
NASA launched its first crewless Artemis mission in 2022, sending the Orion spacecraft on a similar path around the moon and back.